What's up, bro? What are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm alright, I'm just chilling. What's it like there in Alabama?
Oh, just same old work and, recording occasionally.
Dude, so I'm putting this video together and you were at Pachyderm with me. Just, can you tell people how upsetting it was? So like we got there, we set everything up and nothing sounded right.
Yeah, I remember once we got the quad mic'd up and we started testing it just sounded really thin. There was like no low end and stuff like that.
It didn't sound like the record though, right? Like that's
No, not at all.
Yeah, and it was super sad. And remember we were plugging the Randall into the quad cab.
Oh yeah.
We were trying all this crazy stuff to get it to work and it just wouldn't.
Yeah, it got a little closer I think with the Randall, but it still wasn't there.
We made the best of it that we could while we were there, and we like EQ'd the guitars like crazy on the console. We did the best that we could to get it to sound as close as we could to the record, but it was really clear that yeah, there's no way this is what was used. My wife and I had literally just driven all the way across the United States with a car full of all the wrong amps. It was a huge letdown. So after returning home, I had to basically start over. I had to scrap everything that I had learned, everything that I'd been told by everybody surrounding this record, and just completely start over. I had tried hundreds of speakers in the quad reverb and nothing sounded right. I had to go back to the drawing board to figure all this out. Let's start with the quad reverb. Steve Albini has said many times that it was running on one power tube and that Kurt used that amp to record most of the album. One power tube. Well, okay, let's try it. The problem with this is the amp just can't produce a clean tone on one power tube. It's not designed that way. It's a push-pull circuit. It's impossible. And In Utero has a lot of clean tones all over the record. Really skeptical of this. I asked Steve Albini again, like, are you sure it was really on one power tube? And he said, as for the one tube thing, I'm certain there was only one working tube. Two of the tubes had broken glass envelopes, but were still in the sockets. One was whole but didn't light up. Only one was in place and working. And Steve had also said something similar in a Reddit AMA thread. He said, I didn't really know what to think when Kurt told me about the quad with one tube, but when I looked in the back of it, sure enough, there were 3 shattered tubes and 1 pumping away. So if what Steve is saying is the truth, then there's absolutely no way that was the main amp to record In Utero. I had to cross it off the list, at least for now. There was a third mystery amp surrounding In Utero, but Steve didn't remember what it was. He said Kurt would decide which amp would be the main sound and which would be the overdub sound. So the Randall, the quad, and what other amp, I forget which, would be done live, and then the other part overdubbed. Now, I had always thought that the third amp was the Earnie amp. It was basically a Marshall Plexi designed by Earnie to just cut out all the gain. So it's like Marshall platform, but with no gain. So you just get massive amounts of clean tone. I spoke with Earnie Bailey, who was Kurt Cobain's guitar tech, and he told me many years ago he was on the phone with Steve Albini, and Steve Albini had mentioned this Marshall Plexi amp that was wired up for cleans. The problem with that is, I brought the Earnie amp with me to Pachyderm, and there was no way that thing was used. Again, we tried it. I think we came to the same determination too, like with the Earnie amp, right? Like,
Yeah, it just seemed a little too bright and harsh.
it was like a Marshall. It was very Marshall.
Yeah.
Really awesome amp, and I love that amp. But it didn't sound like the actual like the album tones.
Yeah, definitely.
It was sad.
Yeah, it was. We went all the way out there than that.
Nothing made any sense at all. And to make matters even more strange, Steve Albini said this when asked about that amp. He said, I don't recall there being a Plexi. Everyone's information contradicted each other. One person would say this, another person would say this, that disqualifies this. Nothing made any sense about this record at all. So the first thing I had to do is figure out what that third mystery amp was. If you look at all the early interviews surrounding In Utero, it's always been said that Kurt used his twin reverb. It's believed that he had a 1982 ultralinear twin reverb. But again, another dead end because I've owned a ton of 1982 ultralinear twin reverbs. That's one of the first things I did when I started this journey 4 years ago, and there's no way that thing was used. I owned a 67 twin reverb, and that didn't sound right either. I started to wonder if maybe Kurt could have used something that belonged to the studio, like some kind of amp that was there that wasn't his. The problem there is I reached out to all the people that were working at Pachyderm at the time, and no one remembered anything. I could find no records of what amps belonged to the studio at the time. I started to feel pretty hopeless, like I had wasted 4 years trying to figure out this stupid guitar tone, and like I'm never gonna figure it out, basically. I can't even tell you how many times I was close to just giving up on this. I'm really glad I didn't. Because one day, I came across this really specific interview from Earnie Bailey, talking about a Rivera twin reverb. Now these were completely different from regular twin reverbs. Completely. They shouldn't even bear the twin reverb name. It's a complete redesign by Paul Rivera. And Paul Rivera was this genius amp designer that Fender hired in the early 80s to come in and revamp the twin reverb and a couple of their other amps too.
And this is one of the products that I modified in 1979, and I developed a series of modifications for a variety of Fender amplifiers, Princetons, Deluxes, Vibroluxes, twin reverbs, and so on.
And they really sound nothing like a twin reverb. Again, I don't know why they decided to call this a twin reverb. The problem there is Earnie had said ultra-linear twin 2 designed circuit. Twin 2s are not ultra-linear, and it's just probably a hiccup on Ernie's part. I tried all the ultra-linear stuff. I tried the 60s twin reverbs, but I had never tried a twin 2. Moment of truth. I felt like I just found the cure to cancer or something. I literally cried tears of joy. For me, this was a huge breakthrough. I know for a lot of people it's not, but I've been trying to figure this out for so long. So for me, this was a really big deal. And for confirmation, the final nail in the coffin, a friend of mine who wishes to remain anonymous, but we'll call him Smokie. And Smokie sent me a photo from the in utero session in 1993. And there it was, right there, in plain sight. It was right there. All along. I'd been staring at these photos forever, and I never noticed it because I was looking for a big giant stupid quad reverb because of what Steve Albini had told me. That's it. You can see it. You can see the Fender logo right there. I texted it to Earnie as well. Earnie said, "That is incredible. Sharpen the image and the definition." I believe that large road case is one of the 2 guitar coffins. Although that one might have held the drums, my memory is putting the twin in the end of that thing upright. I was just left completely speechless. The twin 2 just sounded like an absolute monster. It sounded like it was the size of 40 quad reverbs. It sounded so much bigger than the quad. Paul Rivera is a f***ing genius. And all this leads to Occam's razor, which basically states the simplest explanation is always the right one. Usually. Now, I didn't know Kurt personally, but I know a few people who did. And from what I understand, Kurt was a man of habit. He wrote all of In Utero on a twin reverb in a closet.
Twin reverb amp.
That was the amp he was used to. That's the amp that he made all of his sounds on at home. So to me, it makes sense. The first thing you're gonna do when you get to the studio to record your record is you're gonna hook up your twin reverb. That's the thing you know that you're familiar with. In fact, he had told Earnie Bailey before recording In Utero that he was planning on using it. That's why Earnie totally did a makeover on it before the session. And I also spoke with Eric Erlandson. He was the guitarist for Hole, but he was also really good friends with Kurt Cobain.
Who's there?
And I told him about the whole quad reverb thing, and he had said, I'm pretty sure it was the twin, not the quad. But things get twisted. I was 1000% sure at that point. Kurt used his twin reverb to record in utero. So was there even a quad reverb then? That was the next thing that I had to figure out. The twin was just way too beefy sounding to do Serve the Servants. And I remember Steve said that Kurt used that quad reverb to do Serve the Servants. So I tested it out. I did it with the Utahs, and that totally did not sound right at all. But I started thinking, like, Utahs don't even matter at this point. The twin reverb was most of that record, so maybe the speakers were different in the quad reverb. I tried everything. Quad reverbs came with JBLs as an upgrade option, Fender PS12s. I tried all kinds of crazy stuff like V30s, greenbacks, sidewinders, Celestion 70s. None of those sounded right at all. Until I just tried the shittiest speaker that you can get in a quad, the one that no one wants. Oxfords. Yeah, that was it. And now like, my mind was just totally blown because things were starting to really make sense. Oxfords were the most common speakers to come in quad reverbs. Utahs weren't. Those were really rare. Again, Occam's razor. It was really clear that Kurt's quad had the Oxfords. And it has this really specific, super trashy sound on one tube. Like that really gritty, crazy distortion on Variape. Yeah, it's that. It was that really specific, like, broken amp sound. It's exactly what it sounds like, is a broken amp. So the quad was not the main amp for in utero, and it wasn't even used very much, but it was used. That part I believe Steve was right about. I believe the one power tube thing and the quad being used, I guess that's probably just the most rememberable thing if you think about a session from 30 years ago. You just like think about that quad, I guess, because it had broken tubes. So with the twin 2 and the quad totally checked off, this left one more amp to figure out. The Randall. We all know the Randall was used, but we had no idea what it was plugged into. And here's where things really start to come full circle, because I spoke with Earnie Bailey and he had told me, hey, actually I checked my notes and I remember that specific high watt cab, it had Celestion 70s in it. 8 ohm ones, not regular ones. It was wired for 8 ohm. Here's what's crazy. Those high watt LA 412 cabs, they should never have Celestion 70s. So they were obviously replaced at some point. Now I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but Kurt did have 2 Soundtech 212 cabinets that had Celestion 70s. I remember hanging out with Jack and Dino and he was telling me about it. He's like, yeah, Kurt had these little cabinets with Celestion 70s. He had used those during the Bleach era and he always had his Randall amp plugged into that. After the high watt popped on the scene though, those Soundtech 212 cabs were never seen again. I don't know. Just saying. So I followed that lead and I loaded my cab with Celestion 70s and it sounded really close. It was weird because it sounded like that speaker, but it sounded like something was still missing. It was really hard to explain actually. This is where my history of recording and engineering really helped me. I listened to that tone on the record a lot and I couldn't help but notice that cab sounds like it's out of phase. It's a really specific sound. If you've wired a speaker out of phase, you'll know what I mean. And once you hear it, you really can't unhear it. It's just this really harsh, nasty sound. Kurt's cabinet sounds exactly like that. So I decided just to try it. Let me try something crazy. I decided to wire the top speakers out of phase with the bottom speakers. In the room, it sounded like shit. All the low end was gone, it sounded awful, but mic'd up, identical. It sounded exactly the same. Now the only reason I could think of those speakers being out of phase is if whoever put them in that high watt cab doesn't work on gear, or it's just a really easy mistake to make. I've done it several times where if you're not paying attention, it's really easy to connect the top part instead of the bottom part. And again, I'm just saying, if Kurt put those speakers from his Soundtech cabinet into the high watt, it seems like a really Kurt kind of mistake to make. I'm just saying, who knows? No way to prove it. I think that's probably what happened, because that specific sound, it's way too specific and distinctive sounding. And that was it. Now all the tones sounded exactly like the record. I had no more questions. Every tone that I could think of was accounted for, and this 4-year journey could finally come to a close. Hallelujah! So now it's really easy to categorize these amps. The Twin 2, it was the main amp. It was the beef amp. It just sounded like an absolute freight train. A monster. Then we have the Randall, which is the presence amp. It's the really, really bright, miswired, funky high watt tone. And then lastly, we have the quad reverb, which just sounds like a trashy, broken amp. Exactly the way Steve Albini described it. And when you layer those in different combinations, that's how that record was really made. I knew this was finally over. Now on to the second part of this video, which I know this video is so long, I'm sorry, but bear with me here because this will all tie together. Now if you've been following this crazy tone saga, you'll know that Kurt Cobain used the Veleno to record most of In Utero.
Oh, that was Steve Albini's metal guitar that he got. It's supposedly a really rare guitar. It's made out of, it's all aluminum.
Wow, it's
Yeah.
pretty good sound.
Yeah.
It's an all aluminum guitar and like literally sounds like nothing else. They sound crazy. The main guitar sound on that record was that Veleno with P90 pickups in it going into the Twin 2. For the overdub stuff, it was either the Jag or the High Flyer depending on the song, going into the Randall or the quad reverb. After getting all these amps figured out, it was super easy to figure out the guitar stuff, and I just couldn't find the Mustang anywhere on the record, or the Farrington. It's my opinion that Kurt just stuck with the Veleno for everything, and the Jag and the High Flyer for overdubs. And the High Flyer had a JB in it while In Utero was recorded. It would later get switched with a Super 2, but that was after the recording. Now I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Geoff Benge. He's the guy that set up the Veleno Lefty for Kurt, and he's an absolute guitar genius. I think he did the Gish Strat as well, and he's done a ton of really amazing guitars. He was Steve's go-to guy for pretty much everything. He used that Veleno for pretty much everything, man. It has such a specific, crazy sound, like the attack of it, the moment you hit a note, it just like shoots off.
Yeah.
It's so different from a wood guitar.
Absolutely. And when it's clean, it's got a very beautiful, clear, shiny, glassy sound,
It's
which
so nice.
is pretty damn cool, yeah.
And this was another one of those full circle moments for me when I talked to him, because he told me that he put in those P90s before In Utero was recorded.
And I remember when he first got that guitar and brought it in. So 31 years ago, or whatever it was, when I set it up lefty for In Utero, I had already worked on it a handful of times, and I'm pretty sure at that point I had already put the P90s in it.
Which we already know at this point, but Steve had also misremembered that and thought it had guilds at the time of In Utero. And what was really crazy about this was over the years, I'd found that the only possible way to pull off those tones on In Utero was with extra light strings. Even regulars, they had like way too much tension. So early on I noticed, like, I don't know why, but that record sounds like super light strings. They do this like really specific sloppy thing. If you listen to the cleans on that record, you'll know. So it was wild when I asked Geoff about this. I was just gonna say, I even experimented with strings a lot. I almost could swear there's like some light gauge strings on there. I mean, I don't know.
I think they would have been on the light side because that guitar, that neck was not, it was a little bit bowed even with no string tension on it.
And it really makes sense now why light strings were on the Veleno, because Geoff had no idea who he was setting up that guitar for.
When I was doing it, I didn't know why I was doing it. I didn't know who I was doing it for.
That's hilarious, yeah.
And so it wasn't until like 6 weeks, I'm guessing later, that the guitar came back, whatever. And then my friend, who was the drummer on that first Urge record, and he's the one who said to me, well, you know what he was doing with those guitars, don't you? And I was like, no. And he said, he just took all that stuff up to Minnesota. He just recorded Nirvana with that. And I was like,
fuck.
Fuck. So I stopped complaining about it and thought that was pretty damn cool.
Do you remember what P90s were specifically?
They were Duncans.
It had a 3B in the bridge and a 1N in the neck. Now the 3B on its own is already a total marvel in pickups. It's just so far off from what a normal pickup would be, and it finally made sense why after all these years I could never get anything to sound like that. The 3B is wound to like 15K with oversized ceramic mags, so it is its own thing. It is not a normal pickup at all. I just wound a clone and put it in here. I couldn't wait for the 3B to get here, so I just made my own in the meantime. That's insane. Sorry I didn't get time to mic it up. I'll do it in the next video. I just wound this last minute. I was like, I really want to see how this sounds in here. That is insane. The 1N in the neck is basically a standard P90, but that 3B, nah, it's crazy. These are the actual pickups that recorded in utero. It's so crazy to look at them. Like, that's the pickups that recorded Heart Shaped Box and Me. Well, basically the whole record. Thank you, Kevin, for providing these photos. It's the coolest thing. The next step of this journey, I know you're gonna laugh, but I gotta go back to Pachyderm. That's the only way this is gonna happen. I gotta take the right amps there and capture this the right way, for me, to really finish this how it's meant to be finished. I even bought a second Twin 2 as a backup, just in case, because while traveling to Pachyderm, like if something happens, these amps are really hard to find and they're probably gonna be impossible to find after this video. So I have two, just in case. Anyways, I'm gonna leave you guys with this. Steve Jobs said,
"You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards."
I know he had that right, because going through this whole project over the years, none of it made any sense moving forward. And I started wondering, like, why am I doing all this for a stupid guitar tone? It makes no sense. But now it makes perfect sense. This didn't have much to do with Nirvana at all in the end. I started getting messages from people all over the world like, "Aaron, you inspired me to start playing guitar." Or, "Aaron, you literally saved my life, man. Thank you." It all really started to make sense. Nirvana was just the catalyst to get people interested in this. I didn't know anything about guitar when this project started. I didn't even play guitar, but it's been such an incredible journey and it's inspired so many people, and I realized that's why I'm here. You can only connect the dots looking backwards.